Namaste coming back up pretty rapidly in response to the last episode. Someone did order a topic pretty quickly, so let's get right into it. My views on Lost TV series came out back about I'd say about 15 years ago, back in 2008. The TV series, and it was about a couple of characters that got lost on an island, and it's kind of similar to like a Bermuda Triangle type of scenario for you guys that are familiar with that, where people kind of go into this area and they get lost. They have another triangle called the Devil's Triangle as well, and they go into this area and they get lost, and they can't be found on radar. Their ship or whatever they're in, their plane is lost from the communication from the satellite, and it's like another area. And it's actually what happens is that they find out. I don't want to spill the beans, of course, to make this a spoiler because it's not. This is more like they want to know my views on it. Like, is it really real? Essentially, is what they want to know, pretty much. Like, is it really true, or was this just more of a fictional type of scenario? And just to directly answer that, I would say it's true, definitely. If you study the Bermuda Triangle and other areas on this planet, there are also areas on land too that when you go into these areas, I've been in there. I know a couple of areas myself that when you go into these areas, you won't be viewed by the satellites in this particular, like on a national level, you'll be viewed by like remote satellites possibly, but the viewership is different in certain areas. And this can actually also go into like when you get into doing videos in certain areas, like the viewership changes. You notice in certain areas, and this goes into the fact that the internet was linked into currency much longer before the dollar, going back into more of studying the rupee and also studying the dinar and other currencies. You'll find out that essentially the dollar being connected to the internet is new, and there was always a grid that the globalists use to trade currencies and money and things like that. So when you start talking about the loss in movies of that sort, these little movies where they get lost on an island, it's essentially about the fact that when you get into certain areas and certain grids, there's no way to communicate with this grid that we're in, and you begin to gain a way to access communication from beings that live in the underworld. There's a mountain called Mount Shasta. You should study that because in this area, this is supposed to be one of the portals that they use and that they walk through to go to the underworld. They go through this Mount Shasta area or whatever. Um, and they go into the underworld through this area or whatever. Once they get into the underworld, it's supposed to be like a multi-level communication system and a grid. Not only that, a traveling system to be able to move through the underworld, the center of the earth, and be able to go through what's called various portals in the earth. And this takes you into a little bit of Area 51 because Lost represents, if you notice, I'm not going to tell what it was about, it's really deep, it's a long show. But if you notice, once it gets deep into it, John Locke had to press a button every so often to keep this reality going. And if he didn't press this button, this reality would go into a different mode or different matrix and eventually go into a glitch to where planes would crash, uh, unexpected accidents leading to death would happen, essentially based upon this area where no one knew about, though, in a different time zone, mind you. When you leave this area, you would go into like the year 2000, I think. But in this area, you would be like in a prehistoric, supposedly prehistoric time, but they begin to discover stuff that, like technology that was like from our era in this area. So they knew that there was something weird about this area because they're like, okay, this is supposed to be a prehistoric area. Why did I just find a piece of an airplane? Stuff like that. So that's essentially what it was about. And it's about the fact that this guy was like, John Locke was like the person that was put in charge through a supernatural event, actually. He had to continue this process, and if he didn't, the worst would be yet to come. So essentially, it's going into Area 51. The Area 51 goes into, if you study the technology of the phone system, and time travel through sound, you'll find out that sound is locked into, and the travel of sound is locked into the diameter of our planet. Meaning that when you communicate and send out signals through sound, you have to do it through an earth grid that's connected to the diameter of our planet, which goes into the ground in this intergalactic system where a lot of child trafficking, a lot of underworld type of events take place in this particular area. And this is how the communication takes place through what's called Area 51, which I was saying earlier has a zero added behind it. When you get into Area 51, there's a zero added behind that, and it goes into area, we would call it Area 510 because of the fact that there's always three numbers in phone codes, the area codes. Area 51 goes into the area codes, and the 51 is the master number, believe it or not, for various different area codes, even going into other numbers. They use 51 for a reason, because Area 51 is located in a certain part of the earth, in the center of the earth, and this is where so-called negative credit is stored and redistributed. And this is why it's so essential, because people that get access to this grid get access to what's called so-called unlimited credit, but they find out that they have to go into dark rituals to keep it going. But they get caught up in a certain amounts of unlimited credit to where they can eventually open the door and gain access to almost anything with this type of credit, because of the fact that you're Visa negative credit, to where even when it's negative, it's positive for you. Pretty deep concept. So this is what Area 51 is about, and the grays are the figures that represent Area 51, and they wore caps. So when you see the grays, this was a cap. Their face that you thought they were like, most people know what a gray alien is. This is one of the most popular so-called aliens. And a gray alien has a cap. That's not how a gray alien looks. They look different when you take the cap off, and they know, the government knows, they never show you the real pictures of them. They look different. They're called Remardians. I've talked about this in my gray video. You can check it out. And I've talked about this Area 51 too in other videos, like the Astral Pyramid, Bells on East Chamber. Check those, reference those videos, because I go into all of that. But essentially, they wear caps, and they're able to communicate digitally through this technology that's over their head. And this is how they travel when they get in their spaceships. You call them UFOs, and they call them shams. When they get into their shams, they move around in these flying saucer-looking shams, and they're able to get communication, travel at certain speeds, a lot faster, through water and everything, to gain access through this portal. And that's what I'll get into in part two, is these various portals are represented by letters in our alphabet. That's what I'm going to talk about, these various grids. You call them portals, and there's an exact way to travel through them, meaning that when you go through the center of the earth, it's not just a straight line. This is what I'm basically speaking on. It's various sections of it. And your height changes and everything, your weight and everything's pretty deep. And there's actually a sun there too. So it's various sections the way it's set up. So it's not just like you just travel through it and you're just moving through it like, like a straight line, like the way you would travel on a surface. Very much different than that. It's very based on weapons and electromagnetism and stuff like that. So I'll go into the lettering, how that plays out in the future, and how they move around these grids that are connected to pyramids and mounds and mountains. That's what I want to really point out. Various pyramids in Tibet, they have proof of this. Underwater pyramids in Japan, no lie. And this is where he was pressing this button on this grid, and the loss. That's one point I'll point out here is, and this video is not too long because you guys make the lost video 24 minutes that I got to get into to watch that. But so it's not too long, but he was pressing this button. This was restarting time and affecting currencies, and goes into information like that. So no, that's what it's about. Essentially, it's about how time and units and numbers go hand in hand. If you play around with units in a written in a certain algorithm or in a sequence is what it is, or a certain amount of numbers, and you figure them out, or what you would call a combination, you begin to work with numbers like that, you can begin to visa time, and they know this. This is stuff that they supposedly call science fiction, that a lot of mathematicians and people that understand this on a mathematical level could definitely bear me witness. I'm not a mathematician at all. This is just a little bit of what I know about it. Yeah, I know that you can move through time through and build machines that align with the planet on this grid and begin to move through time and also begin to visa currency, meaning that getting money won't really be nothing for you on a certain level. We begin to visa time like this because you'll be corresponding with various different markets and currencies that are backed by commodities like what we're speaking of, gray aliens, demonstrating Area 51, creating phone network years ago in the 1800s. This same network is connected to that same grid. It's way before the internet. You got to think about that. Able to send voice signals through the phone lines, through electricity. So this is what it's about. As I get more information, I'll drop more information. With the next episode, we'll go into more of the weapons that they use in the Earth, and how it's tied into certain lettering and symbols, and this is how you learn how to move through it. If you ever, want to get to that level where you explore this stuff, you got to know the symbols and how it's set up in the grid. So definitely got to know a lot about astrology and Shiology as well. Stay vigilant. I'll come up with more. Namaste.